The air that afternoon felt like it had been holding its breath all day. Heavy, still, and just a bit too warm for late spring in the Rockies. We'd set up camp in a meadow surrounded by pines, our tents tucked close together in the open. With a small creek running not far off, it was the kind of place that made you want to lie back and just listen. The murmur of water, the sigh of wind through branches, the lazy hum of insects circling the campfire smoke. There were 6 of us on that trip. Old friends, some newer faces, and though we all got along fine, there were those quiet little divisions that happen in any group. Some people took to doing chores, others to giving orders, and a few just to wandering off for wood every 10 minutes. Still, things had been easygoing enough until the sky decided it had other plans. I first noticed the shift when the breeze died completely. The world seemed to dim, the sunlight turning the colour of tarnished brass. Then came that strange, almost electric smell, ozone and wet dust, followed by the far-off grumble that everyone pretends not to hear for a minute. I glanced west and saw the clouds stacking, dark on darker, like something enormous was crouching behind the ridgeline. "Strong coming," I said, and a couple of the others laughed it off. But I've camped enough to know when the weather's just teasing and when it means business. This time, it meant business. Within minutes, the wind kicked up, snapping the tarp corners and sending sparks swirling from the fire pit. The air turned sharp and cold, and the first drops of rain hit so hard they felt like gravel. We scrambled, yelling over the growing roar, half blind from the wind. "Get the food stowed! Get under the tarp!" someone shouted, but by then it was too late for neat organisation. Everyone was running in different directions, one grabbing packs, another dragging a half-collapsed tent toward the trees. Thunder cracked right over us, so close the ground shuddered. We ended up piled together under the one big tarp we'd managed to secure between 2 pines, crouched over our gear like shipwreck survivors. Rain hammered down in sheets, busy with our own little projects. Now we were huddled shoulder to shoulder under a sagging tarp, the rain hammering inches above our heads, our gear soaked through, and our nerves stretched thin. The wind howled through the pines, bending them like they were bowing to something far greater than us. A flash of lightning illuminated everyone's faces, tense, wet, and pale in the sudden white light. "Guess this is what they call team bonding," someone muttered, and a few of us managed shaky laughs. It wasn't just cold rain running down my neck. It was the realization that we were at the mercy of something far beyond our control. The kind of moment that makes you small in the best and worst ways. Tom, the quiet one, was the first to take charge in a way that felt natural. He tore one of his extra ponchos into strips and started tying down the edges of the tarp so it wouldn't flap loose. "If this thing goes," he said over the wind, "we'll be sleeping in puddles." His calm steadied everyone else. Even Jess, who'd been snapping at her boyfriend all afternoon, started helping, holding the rope steady with white-knuckled hands. Then there was Henry, the self-proclaimed gear guy. He'd been bragging all trip about his high-end setup. But now his expensive tent was a flattened mess out in the meadow. "Should have double-staked it," he admitted, shaking his head. And the humility in his voice was new. "Guess the mountain doesn't care how much REI loves you." That earned a few chuckles, the kind that loosen tight shoulders. For nearly an hour we sat like that, half working, half waiting, while the storm raged. Conversation came in bursts between thunderclaps. Stories, mostly. Tom told us about the time a bear sniffed his tent in Yellowstone. Jess shared that she'd grown up in Kansas and could smell tornadoes before they hit. Even Henry, pride dented but good-humoured now, confessed that this was his first real camping trip. Most of his outdoor adventures sharper. The drip of water from pine needles, the soft squelch of our boots in the mud, the quiet creak of trees settling after being whipped by wind. For a long moment, we just breathed, like we'd been holding it in for hours. Then Jess laughed, a deep belly laugh that startled the rest of us. "We looked like drowned raccoons," she said, wiping rainwater from her cheeks. That broke the tension. Everyone started laughing, shaking their heads, wringing out shirts. Tom got up and stretched, his jacket steaming faintly in the cool air. "Fire's done for," he said, looking over at the blackened pit where our campfire had drowned. "But I think I've got a few dry sticks in my pack." He rummaged through his waterproof bag, because of course he'd been smart enough to have one, and within minutes he coaxed a thin, shivering flame back to life. We all gathered close, hands extended, the orange light flickering across faces that seemed softer now, more open. Henry sat next to me, poking at the fire with a stick. "You know," he said, "I've been trying too hard to impress everyone. With the gear, with the planning, all of it. I just didn't want to look like the newbie." I told him we'd all been there once. "Yeah," he said, chuckling. "Guess nature's got a way of humbling people faster than any boss or breakup ever could." Jess and her boyfriend, Evan, had been on rocky terms before the trip, snapping over small things, both too proud to back down. But now they were sitting shoulder to shoulder, sharing a damp blanket, their earlier bickering replaced by quiet murmurs. I caught her whisper, "You held the tarp better than I did." He smiled, and that was all it took. The storm had blown something loose between them too. Even I felt it, that subtle shift in how we saw each other. We weren't just co-workers, friends, or friends of friends anymore. We were the group that had sat under a tarp while the sky came undone. That sort of thing doesn't fade quickly. As the fire grew stronger, the meadow began to steam, the last wisps of mist curling up into the cooling night. Someone dug out a bag of marshmallows, soaked but salvageable. Up again, slowly, carefully, feeding it with twigs and the driest wood we could find beneath the pines. The flames licked high, golden and alive, and with them came a feeling of deep, quiet contentment. We sat in a loose circle, wrapped in damp jackets and shared blankets. Nobody seemed in a hurry to turn in. The air was cool but soft, and the fire's warmth filled the space between us like a living thing. Conversation flowed more freely than it had all trip. Not the usual camp chatter about gear or routes, but the kind of talk that happens only after you've been through something together. Tom told us about his father, how the old man used to take him camping every summer until his knees gave out. "He always said, storms were the best teachers," Tom said, poking at the coals. "You can't negotiate with the weather. You just learn to listen to it." Jess shared a story from when she was 16, about getting lost during a storm at a music festival and spending the night under a vendor's tarp with strangers who became lifelong friends. "Seems like a theme with me," she said with a grin. "I meet good people when things go sideways." Even quiet little Marcy, who had barely said a word since we'd left town, started to open up. She told us about moving cross-country alone after a bad breakup, how this trip was supposed to be her reset button. "I almost didn't come," she said softly, staring into the fire. "But sitting here now, I'm glad I did." Jess reached over and gave her hand a squeeze. And that simple gesture said more than any words could. The night deepened. The forest alive with the sounds of crickets and dripping leaves. A gentle fog rolled in, wrapping around the trees like breath. Every now and then, a gust of wind stirred the canopy and sent tiny showers of droplets raining down on us. We didn't flinch. We just laughed, pulling hoods tighter and scooting closer to the fire. It's strange how quickly fear turns to fondness once it's behind you. That storm, which had seemed ready to tear our camp apart, now felt like a shared secret, something only we could truly understand. I could see it in everyone's faces. The fading orange light. The others had already crawled into tents, their muffled laughter giving way to steady, peaceful breathing. I sat there a while longer, letting the quiet sink in. There's something sacred about the hush that follows chaos, a kind of promise that nature always keeps. Everything changes, and everything returns to calm. Tom handed me a mug of what passed for coffee, lukewarm and smoky from the fire, but it tasted perfect. "Crazy day," he said, voice low so as not to wake the others. I nodded. We didn't need to say much more. The storm had done all the talking it needed to. In that silence, we understood what it had given us. Not just safety or survival, but perspective. Out there, stripped of everything easy or certain, you see people as they really are. And maybe you see yourself that way too. By morning, the meadow looked different again. Sunlight spilled over the peaks, turning every drop of water on the grass into a spark of light. The tents steamed gently as the sun warmed them, and the air smelled of pine, wet soil, and the faint trace of smoke from the dying fire. We moved slowly, packing gear in comfortable silence, no one rushing to leave. When Henry joked that his $400 tent now looked like a chewed-up sandwich wrapper, everyone laughed. Not the nervous laughter of the day before, but the kind that comes from knowing you've earned it. Before we broke camp, Jess suggested we take a group photo. We lined up awkwardly, squinting into the morning light, mud still caked on our boots and hair matted from the night's damp. Looking at that picture later, I remember thinking it didn't capture the real story. The fear, the wind, the rain, the laughter under that tarp. But somehow it did. You could see it in our faces. Something unspoken, but solid. Like the bond that forms when people face the wild together and come out the other side. As we hiked back down the trail, I glanced over my shoulder once more. The meadow gleamed under the sun, calm and harmless now, as if the storm had never happened. But we all carried a piece of it with us. The roar of the wind,